and you alone. Guyana, Guyana, I'll be holding on to you forevermore. Guyana, Guyana, may the blessings of God never leave your shore. A paradise so wondrous to behold, a work of art, your heart is gleaming gold. They sail the waters, soar above the trees, to find the gem between the mountains and seas. Your children know we try though we may fall. We stand united now to heed your call. Our fathers fought the fights for liberty. Forever I'll defend Guyana free. Guyana, Guyana, I'll be holding on to you forevermore. Guyana, Guyana, may the blessings of God never leave your shore. Guyana, Guyana, I'll be holding on to you forevermore. Guyana, Guyana, may the blessings of God never leave your shore. Rise up for your land. Rise up, won't everybody stand? Rise up for your land. Rise up, won't everybody take a stand? Rise up for your land. Rise up, won't everybody stand? Rise up for your land. Guyana, Guyana.
Good evening and welcome to Plain Talk. My name is Christopher Ram. Thank you for joining me this evening. We missed last week. There was a communication mix-up. We apologize. But I hope that we will make up for it this evening. As you will see on your screen, we have the pleasure of the newly elected leader of the PNCR, Mr. Aubrey Norton. Aubrey has been a friend of mine for many years from University of Guyana and working together on various issues. Aubrey, welcome to Plain Talk.
Thanks for having me, Chris, and again, good evening to your viewing and listening audience.
Let me promise you, it wouldn't be any easier than any other time. It will always be respectful. I can tell you that. And it's 1 month and 1 day. Tell me how it's been.
Well, essentially, I would say it has been good. I've been engaging a wide cross-section of the Guyanese society. I've been engaging the diplomatic community. I've been engaging members of the party and supporters and mere followers. And the response has been extremely good. They give you a lot of ideas. It's for you to concretize them and implement as is seen as necessary. But outside of that, it has been a good month. Of course, your people have high expectations, and so one has to do the work to ensure one delivers, because those expectations can very easily turn into frustration.
Yes, we all know that only do well in this country.
Yeah.
In last week's Sunday Stablo, Attorney at Law Ralph Ramkuran and himself, leader of ANOG, etc., said we need a strong opposition. How does that help you? How does that challenge you?
Well, the truth is we need a strong opposition. And opposition in every sense of the word. Meaning that we have to be on top of the issues. We will have to establish think tanks to deal with a lot of the issues. And to be able to expose the government when necessary and support if necessary. But we need strong opposition because we are operating at a time when a lot of resources are coming to our country. But until now, we have not been able to see the benefits trickling down to the people of Guyana. And therefore, we need to be very clear as we oppose the present government. The opposition has to be in a way to make them accountable. One of the biggest problems for me is that they are not accountable. The second area of opposition for me is that the government has this tendency to want to dominate and control every aspect of life. I mean, only recently we heard from the Vice President that there's no place for civil society. He actually said that they don't go to an election and therefore they shouldn't have a say. The people elected them and they are accountable. But that is a totalitarian kind of authoritarian view. In a democratic society, there is a place for civil society. Civil society helps to ensure there is accountability, helps to ensure there is transparency, and civil society in its true sense, once it is not politically aligned and it is pursuing the national interests and the interests of the people they represent, then in my opinion, civil society is relevant, and therefore the opposition itself will have to support those civil society positions that will further the democratic process in Guyana.
How do you deal with civil society that is also critical of the political parties, whether in opposition or in government?
Well, I believe it is civil society.
You know the culture in this country.
Yeah, but I believe it is civil society's role to hold people accountable, but it's government opposition. I anticipate that they will be critical because humans make mistakes, and so there will always be scope for criticism. But for me, the issue is not criticism. The issue is, what should civil society be doing? Civil society should operate independent of the political forces, analyze situations, and then take their position based on their perceived interests and the situation, focusing on the development of the country. Once civil society can do that, then when they come with a criticism, we will have to respond. And respond we will. For instance, the Electoral Reform Group put out some information. We don't agree with everything they would have said.
Yes.
But we do agree that they're saying that there's a critical role for dialogue. That a lot of these issues demand stakeholder involvement. They're also contending that there is need for further analysis of the situation. All of those are things we are comfortable with. Of course, in the very document that we said we welcome, there are criticisms of us. And we're prepared to live with the criticisms and discuss the criticisms. But in the final analysis, where we think they are making a positive contribution, we will welcome it and on some occasions support it, depending on the nature of it.
Let's go back to elections. There has always been doubts about political parties. We saw Balram Singh Rai, who just died, and he accused the PPP leadership, Chedi Jagan, of manipulating the election results, internal election results. There was some fear, Mr. Norton, about the conduct and the management of the elections of the PNCR. It came off without hitch from all appearances. It gave you an overwhelming majority of a minority of votes. Let's be frank. Did it surprise you
Well,
how well it went?
well,
One.
no, I was
And
not
two.
surprised. First, many of us in the party recognized that the election was critical in the sense that it had to send the signal to the people of Guyana that we are prepared to have free and fair elections, and we are prepared to do everything to ensure that the elections were above board. Throughout the process, that was the focus. The returning officer was agreed to by all parties, Vincent
Vincent
Alexander.
Alexander.
And I must submit that he did an excellent job in terms of involving all the stakeholders and resolving issues that emerged that would have removed doubt. So I believe we came out of those elections with good credibility, in the sense that no one could have questioned the results. And both,
No one has.
and
It-
both
it-
candidates
nobody
would have
has.
conceded. I think it was unfortunate when Vincent said there's likely to be about 3,000 delegates.
Yes.
People went down the road of saying he said there will be 3,000 delegates. But you had an accreditation process. And in that accreditation process, all the groups and delegates had to be verified. And at the end of that verification, there was like about 1,900 or 800.
Yes.
And the percentage of that was very high. It is unfortunate that people were using 3,000 and say that it was this and it was that. And so I thought that it was also an example for other political parties to follow, because we're still in the mode of people dominating and controlling political parties, and the actual membership not having
In your
its
case,
say.
it was a wide membership.
In this case, it's not only did the white membership had its say, but we campaigned in the public domain.
Yes.
And so people knew what commitments we made, and outside of the party, people can hold us accountable. For instance, I said, I do not intend to go down the road of a maximum leader. And in the last month, I have done everything as leader of the party to ensure people are involved, and most of the decisions, the executive had a say, and we made decisions.
When you said you didn't intend to be, you would not intend to be a maximum leader, was that a suggestion that has been the practice in the past within the PNCR?
In all post-colonial societies, and I can speak specifically of Guyana, there has been the tendency to treat the early post-independence leaders, first the anti-colonial struggle
Yes.
leaders, and the early post-colonial leaders, be it Burnham or Jagan in the Guyana context, as maximum leaders. They built the party,
Building
and people saw
considered
them.
fathers of the nation as well.
Correct. And people saw them as knowing what was good for the party and country. Of course, all of them would have made mistakes. We then moved to other leaders who, I think, adopted a maximum leader approach, but didn't have the skills and the respect of C.F. Forbes Burnham and Dr. Chedi Jagan. And therefore, to me, we had passed through this path And we were at the point now where we need to widen the involvement and to allow people to be part of the decision-making process, rather than an individual believing that he or she knows what is best for the party and giving direction to the party. And when I say I don't intend to go down the road of maximum leader, I'm merely saying to the party, to Guyanese people, I do not see myself as having the right to determine critical issues that will affect the lives of the people in the party and our support base by myself.
You know as well, Aubrey, in the flush of victory, all these grand and honorable things are said. And then when criticism comes, the leaders tend to marshal people around themselves. How do you prevent something like that happening to Aubrey Norton?
Well, first of all, one of the things I have been doing is to say to people, criticize me. I have had numerous criticisms since I'm leading the party. And I've said to some, I agree here, I disagree here. We must continue to discuss it. I think the problem comes first when we focus on staying on the position for life. That's one of the first problems. If you focus on staying in a position for life, you tend to become very protective and don't trust anybody. I think that's the first thing that needs to be removed. The second thing that needs to be recognized is that all of these people around have views, they have interests, and we are better off as a political party if we could listen to those views, understand the interests, and together work out compromise positions that allow us to move forward. There are going to be cases as a leader where there are all the discussions and your instinct tells you that this is what should be done. In that case, I believe it is the leader's task to seek to convince the people around him that he will take those decisions and face the consequences. Because there are going to be times when you hold a strong view on an issue. But the other thing that we need to do, both as a party and as a nation, is to become a little more thick-skinned. If every criticism sends you off, then you'll become a dictator. If, however, you can accept criticisms and recognize where your errors are. I had a professor in England who used to say to us, in life, one of the first things you must do in dealing with an issue is to ask yourself, what have you contributed to the problem? And if you accept that you are likely to be part of the problem, criticisms can help you to identify your role in the problem, and you have got to be mature enough to deal with it and solve it. And I believe those are the things that need to be done to ensure you don't end up in like a cul-de-sac and afraid of everybody around you. I also believe that if you have a certain level of competence, you do not see everybody as a threat. One of the things that I think that pushes this insular fear, among other things, is when you yourself worry about your ability. Insecurities. And so I think once you are fairly secured, you understand the dynamics, then you are less likely to go down the road of seeking to dominate and control everything. Historically, I have opposed domination and control. Anybody who knows me and knows me in the PNC will tell you, historically, if I disagree with something, I say it. And so I've come out of a culture in which we disagree. And we tell you we disagree. What we need to do now is to ensure there's a level of maturity that when we disagree, we can disagree, then agree and move on.
But you will continue to foster that culture.
Yes.
Let me ask you this, and look, I know, Aubrey, people are, journalists set you up to make life uncomfortable and so on, Harmon and Granger and all these things. and we're not here for that this evening. But we cannot ignore the fact that Harman, Mr. Joseph Harman, was supported by President Granger. He has been a protege, practically an alter ego, some of words you can use. Do you see the rejection of Joseph Harman as a rejection of Granger? President Granger.
Let me say this. I think the members of the People's National Congress Reform know what they want. They want to feel represented. They want to know that there is a program and a plan to take the party forward. The members of the PNCR, they like to know that they are in contact and in touch with their leader. The members and supporters of the PNCR, I believe, for them, they had enough of what I will describe as elitist leadership, and they were looking for grassroots leadership. As you know, I campaign on providing grassroots leadership, not being elitist, developing a program for the party. And I believe I have been able to read the pulse of the party correctly. And having read it, I got the overwhelming support of the party to lead the party.
Though you haven't quite answered my question.
Well, you see, I have answered your question.
But as I said, I'm not trying to put you in a corner.
No, but the thing is, I don't like the notion of rejection.
That's how elections go, though.
Correct. In terms of the results of the election, I can say to you, it has endorsed my leadership. If in the process it rejects anyone, then the people will conclude on that.
Let's move on. How would you assess the state of your party on the date you became leader?
The party is strong on the ground. The party has its membership intact, its support base intact. I would say this: what the party needs is reorganization and reinvigoration. And I think that is what this particular team that is elected set out to do. Reorganize the party. Ensure it has a functioning public relations and communications section. Ensure it has a functioning legal team. Ensure it has a functioning information technology unit. A functioning secretariat. So that when it discusses policies and develop plans and programs, they are implemented. And so my assessment is that the membership was there, the support base was there, but the organizational structure was weakened. And therefore, it's for me to give it the leadership and strengthen it and create the conditions for the party to move forward and position itself at a point where it can win elections in the quickest possible time. So, to me, it is institution and capacity building that is critical at this stage in the party. Of course, the party has to meet out. In the last period, I don't think the party reached out to people in the way that it should. One of the things I'm doing is to reach out to people of all ethnic groups. I'm reaching out to the religious community. Some of them don't want you to put it in the public domain. So I will take pictures, but I don't put it out.
Yep.
But I've been meeting out. I am beginning the process of meeting citizens as well, who might not be in politics, but have a contribution to make. Many of them would send you information.
How do you distinguish between those people and the civil society that you started talking about?
Civil society tend to be in organization.
Okay.
But there are a lot of individuals who are not in organization, who have views, who have interests, and want you to articulate it for them. And so they send you the information, etc. I'll give you a practical example. I've been talking about the business community, but every small businessman I would have met, regardless of ethnicity, complains that the private sector commission doesn't reflect their interests. For them, the budget measures satisfy the private sector commission, that little group. But they said to me, look, we need tax relief like anybody. We need the government to facilitate us developing. And therefore, there should be resources placed into micro and small businesses. And so from talking with them and engaging them, I have been able to take the issue to my party central executive, and we have agreed that we have to, in this process, support the disadvantaged. We have to support the poor. We have to support the elderly, single parents, women, children. We have to support micro business, small businesses, so that we become the representatives of these sectors that are not as strong as the private sector commission, which has the resources to articulate and support their own position. So we are in contact with them, we talk to them, and they suggest to us measures as well that we should suggest. We discuss it, and once we agree, we advocate their interests. Look, political parties' tasks is to represent people. We have chosen at this stage to represent a lot of the people that are dispossessed, because at this time in our history, with oil resources coming, we cannot sit by and allow the resources all to go to who have, and those who do not have are excluded.
That's a serious problem. In talking about your party, the state of the party, you didn't mention finances. In order to do the things you want to do, Aubrey, how do you get money? Because you could have the greatest of just to get around this country.
Well, I don't know
just
if
to convene meetings.
I don't know if you know, when I started campaigning, people said I didn't have money, which is true. I'm no rich person.
I was just about to ask you, but do you?
I'm no rich person. But once people believe I was genuine, that I'm prepared to give them leadership, both in the diaspora and in Guyana, I began to get support of all ethnic groups. I didn't go money grabbing. I would say to some people, look, I'm going to the Rupununi, this is what it costs. And I sought to account. And people began to contribute. Now, I believe as we do our work and people are satisfied that we are genuine, we really want to support the people we are talking about, and that we are not on some plan for personal self-aggrandizement, but rather raising resources to promote and protect their interests. I don't only believe, I know resources will come. We have begun to obtain resources from a lot of people whose name I can't call.
Fine.
Because of the nature of our politics. But I am convinced that once people see you as a viable alternative and that you're doing what they want you to do, resources will come. May I also make this point? And a lot of times it's not the absence of resources, it's the poor use of resources, and sometimes the resources not getting into where it should get into for us to do our work. It is my intention as leader of the party to ensure the resources go to the work that we have to do, and that there is accountability for it.
I asked you about the state of your party. What about the state of the country?
Well, for me, there are a number of things that worry me in this country. First, if you are a democratic society, then you should operate based on the rule of law. There is clear evidence emerging that the focus is not on the rule of law.
Do you want to give a couple of examples?
All right, let me give you an example. You had an election petition. 2 judges ruled 2-1. One would have expected those who lost would take whatever legal channel there is for redress. But to come out and say you have to remove the judges, and then the vice president supports it, it sends a signal that you have no interest in the independence of the judiciary. If the judiciary
Or the rule of law.
And if the judiciary rules in your favor, then it's fine. But the minute they rule against, you're in trouble. Let me give you another example of Sherrod is alleged to have called a man linked to the PPP and the Elections Commission a jagabat and a trench crapper. And I repeat, he's a jagabat and a trench crapper. Is that a cybercrime? How could that be a cybercrime? But here is a man now being charged and told it's a cybercrime. And while all of this is going on and you're clearly trumping up charges, etc., you inherited a police force in which the previous government expended a lot of resources to train the policemen and increase their investigative capacity. Any reasonable observer will accept that we were solving crimes between 2015 and 2020. You come in, you move all the people that are solving crime, you put back the same people that were linked to corruption, you put back the same people that when the drugs and drug lords dominated and they resolved no cases, you put them back to head your criminal investigation. You're immediately complicit with illegality. Explain to me how a man could be shot on Main Street, where right down the line you have cameras, including cameras for the president house, the prime minister house. Suddenly these cameras don't work and you can't solve the crime. Now clearly you're complicit in illegalities. We saw recently they charged a young man for the murder of her in Boston. You give him a manslaughter charge. You give him a manslaughter charge. But first of all, he's a policeman, and so we knew all the time they knew who did it, and they were defending it. Then you charge him for manslaughter rather than murder, when you know full well that this man shot a man in his bed. Clearly, you want this man on the road because you have some interest in him being on the road. You're no longer interested in the law. You're interested in perpetuating a system in which there will be extrajudicial killing when it suits you, and when that happens, the person is protected in some fashion. In this case, by a charge that allows him to get bail, when it should be the other way around. He should have been facing a murder charge, and if it comes down to manslaughter, through argument I could understand. So it says to you the rule of law is in trouble in Guyana. Then we go to the local democratic organs, where clearly the REO is the servant of the council, and you should at the minimum allow the elected regional democratic councils to function. But what you do, you put a minister that is a control freak called Darren Lal, and what he does is intervene in the day-to-day functioning of regions. deprive them of resources, and even seek to dominate and control everything that they do.
Let me ask you this, Aubrey. Do you think the APNU AFC should have changed that arrangement whereby the REO, really the CEO, is of the region, comes from the dictate of central government? Why do you think the coalition government did not change that?
I think what happened is they felt they can go in as they did and allow the regions that were won by the PPP to function, the regions that are won by us to function. Of course, there were cases of skirmishes. And so I don't think they saw the need to change it. I am of the view that it should be changed and that it should be made clear that the REO serves the Regional Democratic Council and not the minister.
I don't think
but that is not the worst area. Probably the worst area is the Local Government Commission. I know throughout the debates about this commission, the whole intention was to have like an appellate body. So if anything is discrimination, wrongful dismissal, etc., of people in the local government system, they would have had a commission that is independent to resort to. Unfortunately, I think the APNU AFC erred. They passed that bill that the PPP had proposed without making the changes, and so it has returned to haunt us.
They also passed the Cybercrime Act, which has some good features.
Yeah.
But the threshold, as happened in the Sheriff Duncan case, is clearly too low.
Yes.
If you can be charged with calling trench crapper, where is Guyana's sense of humor?
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned a few issues, but do you see bigger problems that really down the road could turn out, if they fester, if they're not addressed,
Yes.
that they could become really critical challenges for us as a country?
I think the Natural Resource Fund is one case. If we do not find or develop a natural resource fund in which there are checks and balances and people can't pillage it and raid it as they like, we will end up in trouble, because there will be poor allocation of resources, there will be increased corruption, and what in essence will happen is resources will not get to the people. And that, I think, is a danger that we are watching.
Why is it the PNCR under Aubrey Norton isn't challenging that piece of legislation in court?
As far as I know, work is being done to challenge the legislation in court. I don't think that we just want to run and challenge it and then you lose. But as far as I know, work is being done to challenge the piece of legislation in court.
Let me ask you this, Aubrey. What's your 100-day? Do you have a 100-day plan?
I would say I have a plan. I wouldn't say a 100-day plan. The first phase of the plan is really to strengthen the party and to ensure it's a well-oiled machinery. Another important phase of the plan is to ensure we robustly respond to the government, especially when they are misinforming, when they are creating conditions for corruption, etc. As you would have noted, one of the things that we have attempted to do as a party is to not allow the PPP to put a narrative out there and believe it even when the narrative is wrong.
So, I'm still, and let me say this, I would have liked to hear, I believe people should have targets and 100-day plans and these things. But once, you know, because it's moving parts you're talking about, and you did hint at it, whilst you're strengthening the institution, things are happening out there. In fact, things have happened out there since, and that just have not been addressed. So it's not like you well, lots of things in the Constitution, commitments, the use of funds, the very substantial contingency fund that we've had. We hear lots of cases of abuses, and it's not that they are allegations, and it's not that Aubrey Norton comes in on December the 18th, is it?
Yeah.
And therefore it's a clean slate. No, you're leader of a continuing entity.
I agree.
And therefore, whatever might have gone wrong, what the party had failed to do at the date you took it up, it's your job.
But you would agree that it takes some time to develop the capacity to do the things you want to do. There are some things you can do immediately. Let's take, for instance, I believe that the PNC needs a legislative agenda. We need to have a legal team that identifies the areas of the Constitution we think need to change so that they can serve the people. One area is the procurement system. I believe that there are areas in the local government law that we need to change. But until you put the legal minds together, they do the research, you will not be able to deal with the legal agenda in a month. Now, in the meantime, like you mentioned, tackling the natural resource fund, we have to tackle it from the standpoint of what happened in Parliament and other elements that are illegal. But that will take research.
And of course, they only become illegal. You have to establish that they're illegal. Yeah.
Correct, which we intend to do in the courts. So there are some things you can do almost immediately, but there are some things, Chris, you have to develop the institutional capacity to deliver on. And I must submit, it's a criticism of the PNC, but it is a fact. Some of those institutions we allowed to go, and we are now rebuilding.
And also, Aubrey, whilst you're dealing with those issues, you have this question of the internal issue, the leader of the opposition, as you quite articulately said, it's tradition. Mr. Harman said, look, it's a constitutional position, etc. You are the leader of the major party of the opposition. By any popular measure, you probably would be in the National Assembly.
Yeah.
But you have to fight for that. The public is seeing this as the PNC are consuming energy in terms of internal and, quite frankly, unnecessary personal struggles.
Well, you know, what I would say is this. It's an issue we have looked at. It's an issue we have strategized at. And an issue we intend to resolve. I don't want to get into too much details, because when you get into details, you know it go in all directions. But I think we are clear as to how we will approach this.
Yes, but I don't think you could fault the public, and the public is saying that, look, we want a strong PNC, we want a strong opposition. You could fault them for saying, look, this thing ought to be resolved, and we whilst we have the natural resource fund issue, and that's a 50-year issue we're talking about.
Yeah, I agree.
Here we're dealing with somebody just clinging on by the tip of the finger.
In these processes, you have to allow people to see that, look, you are going it in a particular way, and they will identify the obstacles and help you to move the obstacles. That's all I would say.
I think it's a little bit more difficult than that.
That's all right.
I understand. The Cummingsburg Accord. Where do you, Aubrey Norton, stand on the Cummingsburg Accord?
Well, the amended Cummingsburg
Yes,
Accord.
well, yeah, as amended.
Yeah. First of all, I believe the principles in it should guide the party. I do not believe we should agree to 70-30. And then on every issue, some group come and say they want 50-50. So the first thing is to establish the principle. That we agree that this is the formula. Moving forward, we will be guided by that formula.
Have you decided on this question of this division, 70-30, 60-40, 50-50?
Yes, as far as I know,
So what's it now?
it's 70-30,
70-30.
as far as I know.
And that's
But yes, but I also...
Is that down on paper?
As far as I know, yes. But you see, it is a matter I will engage the AFC on, and to have clear understanding of how we approach it. I believe in coalition politics. You have to discuss and be on one page. And one of the weaknesses, in my opinion, is that there have not been enough discussion between the APNU and the AFC that allows you to resolve issues and then decide how we move forward. It is my intention, I can tell you I'm meeting the WPA shortly, and it is my intention in that meeting to discuss with them and to kind of work out how we relate to each other, first as two parties, and then how we relate in the APNU.
Do you see that? Is it your intention, then, Aubrey, that the AFC that the WPA should rejoin?
Yes, I think the WPA brings things to the table. Look, if you accept that discussions in themselves help you to understand and to clarify, then you will accept that one element of the WPA is that it's an intellectual type party.
Yes.
And therefore, it is not solely votes. While votes matter, you cannot gainsay the role of ideas in the development of a political process. And so, I believe that the WPA has a contribution to it. May I also point out that the WPA has been most active in Buxton, which is traditionally a PNC stronghold.
Yes.
And therefore, it is in the PNCR interest to work with the WPA to ensure that when we're going forward towards the election, we are united. And so there are advantages.
How do you take to the accusations made of people like the parties like the WPA that they really are not democratic? They haven't had any sort of elections for decades. That in the APN you have essentially one-person parties. And how do you take to that type of situation?
Now, first of all, my preference is for all parties to be democratic and their leadership be elected. But it is not my task to direct what those parties do. First thing. The second thing is...
But would they... You have... look, no one can deny that these elections by the PNCR in December are probably the best party elections held in this country for the past decades. Isn't that a standard you should insist on? Or you just saying you will encourage, but you will not insist?
It's a standard that we think we can put up to be followed. But the internal dynamics of every political party will determine how they get there. The PNC didn't get here just at one stroke. There were a number of internal processes in the party over the years that culminated with what happened here. And if you observe, people like Mr. Alexander used to be on the side of what happened there. I used to be on the side of what happened. There are others. But it didn't happen in one night. It didn't happen in one day. The process culminated on the 18th was a struggle for a proper internal democratic system in the party. Let us not forget, we struggled to have primaries. Robert Corbyn agreed we should have had primaries, and we began the process by having those primaries. That contributed to the process. And so I don't want us to see it as an event.
Okay.
I want us to see it as a process, and that the parties we're talking about will go through their own processes.
What about these, the other grouping I spoke about, and Mr. Granger seems to have had something of an admiration for them, these very small, almost shell parties. What's your position on those?
Well,
Not necessarily a PNU's position, but your position of it.
No. Our party took a position that we need to discuss coalition, and there should be the admittance of no other political party until we discuss it and we agree how we move forward and what kind of criteria we should put. It is obvious to me that it can't much benefit if you bring one or two persons and say that they're a party. But that might be the reality that exists. So we live with that reality. What we shouldn't do is now extend the same thing into the future. We need to now discuss and work out the future. And that's what we are prepared to do.
You had two parties that appear to have brought some kind of disagreement within the ranks of the APNO, maybe the PNC. The one headed by young Sharma, Jaipal Sharma, and I think the one by Tabitha Hali. What's the position with the PNC
the position
versus those parties?
The position of the PNCR has been and continues to be, we are in support of coalition, but we should do a proper assessment of where the coalition is and set out clear criteria that parties must meet to become part of the APNU, rather than just somebody wake up tomorrow morning and say, oh, I have a party, and you come and you're entitled to a seat or two. I think the PNC had discussions at the level of CC, asked that those two parties be placed on hold, and we will address it as we move forward.
You have benefited from what's called a honeymoon type of period. You come in, you have a right to work through the initial challenges. The party made a very interesting decision to distance itself from this popular activity, the cleaning of the city. Now we know that how politics are played. The city council has been made as a political football, not for political parties across the board. Was not a little bit of petulance? Sorry to use a strong word like that, Aubrey.
I believe that one has to look at the situation. The PPP came to power and met a clean city because we were cleaning it. They have starved the city council of resources, one.
When you said the PPP, clean city, when? You mean in August 2020?
Yes, in August 2020, the city was in a much better state then. And the municipalities were obtaining their subventions, etc., so that they can do work. The government was also assisting. The PPP came to power and allowed the garbage to pile up. They starved the city council of resources. Across this country, they are clearly showing they do not believe in local democracy. They believe they, the PPP, must control every community. Now we believe that the city must be clean, but we do not believe that you should wake up one morning, take the police, take the Ghana Defense Force, and clean up the city. You expect a president on Friday. What happens after this one-off? Is there going to be a structured approach to cleaning the city? We said in our press statement that they should be mobilizing people to work on a permanent basis through the city council, etc., so that the city is maintained clean. You put up this facade of arresting 3 people as litter bugs. The big litter is this come and dump a truck, not no junkie come in and drop 2 thing and push in a wheelbarrow. So it shows the idiocy. The littering of Georgetown is not done by 2 and 3 junkies showing things there. There is, or there are persons coming from all around in trucks dumping the garbage. So just charging a couple litter bugs wouldn't solve the problem. We need a structured approach to maintaining Guyana clean, including the city.
Those points are well taken, Aubrey. But wouldn't it have been better, perhaps, and more mature, to have taken part in the exercise, which is for the good of the city, and what is good for the city is good for the country. After all, that's the country's capital. And yet make those very points that you're making now. It would have lended strength and legitimacy.
Well, we shouldn't lend legitimacy to what happened there.
No, legitimacy to the points you're making.
Oh, but
to what you're making.
But I'm saying to you, look, you have to make a decision. You will live with principle or popularity alone. Doing that might have made you popular, but it would not have changed the fact that this is a one-off and the government does not have a structured approach to cleaning Guyana.
Well, I think the big problem, you're the guest, I'm not a guest, but I think part of the problem is we don't give these local, the region sufficient money.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
That's part of the big problem.
Yeah.
We had a big issue, the Local Content Act. You started your public life in foreign affairs, I think. What's your view on this attempt by groups outside of Guyana to say, look, this move by the government for the Local Content Act is a violation of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas? Where do you stand on that?
First thing I would say is this. It is not that the government wasn't told. In the debates, they were told
by
that Patterson that there is a likelihood of this conflict.
Yeah.
In their normal arrogance and unwillingness to listen to anything outside of what they're saying, they say they will deal with it
when it arises.
But
I'm asking you, what's your point? Yes.
Hold a minute. My position is simple. We have to have a local content that allows Guyanese to benefit. But at the same time, the government, in my opinion, is not putting anything in place to improve the capacity of locals to take on these activities. Let us look at the EPA. The attempt was being made to train people so we could assess and determine on these issues. They stopped training. So there is no capacity to do proper environmental assessment, which means foreign companies will walk all over you. Now hold a minute. If you're talking local content, it is not just the law to facilitate it, it's developing the capacity to be able to access the resources.
Did your party vote for the Local Content Act?
I think they supported the local content, and they made recommendations for changes.
Some of which were accepted.
Some of which were accepted.
One of the features, and I'm going to ask you, Claire, whether this is something that you think the PPP should be applauded for, the government should be. Equal pay to Guyanese for work that they do that is comparable to.
We said that before the PPP in many statements.
No, but so they've done it. Are you?
I have no problem. I agree that it should be done.
We come back. Well, time is going to be catching up on us very shortly. Local government elections. They should be held this year.
But first, with a clean list. I have no problem with local government elections. We want local government elections. But it cannot come with a bloated list. We have to clean the list. Once there's a clean list and the list begins to reflect Guyana's reality, we're prepared to go to local government
so
elections.
if if the Guyana Elections Commission and with the minister who designates a date for the elections, am I right?
Yeah.
Okay. If between them they say, okay, we're having elections with this list, are you going to say we are not going to contest it?
We are going to assess the situation at the time and make the decision we think is the best interest in the party and the people.
But what Aubrey you just said, if it's this list, you ain't going.
No, I never said that.
Okay, tell me what you
I
said.
said we want a clean list. We'll do everything to get a clean list. I never went to the extreme of saying whether we'll go or not without a clean list.
Does local government or do local government elections have that same mechanism where you have the claims and objections period and so on?
Yes,
So your
but
knowledge-
claims and objections in its simple form cannot clean this list. There are other approaches that have got to be used.
Like?
I want to get into the details of it.
No, but give us
Look,
and I have a question to you,
There are-
which you ran from the last time. I'm going to put you
there are
back.
mechanisms in the law that can be used to clean the list. Now, you remember the ruling which said that you couldn't take names off the list?
Yes.
But I am aware that there are some mechanisms which we will recommend that can be used to clean the list.
Are you going to come up with these so that Guyanese, forget PPP, forget PNC, forget APNO, we the people, want to have local government elections? Are you going to facilitate that, Aubrey?
Yes, we want local government elections.
And you will not put yourself... Now, let me ask you this question, because I'm sure the light is going to come on very shortly. When last I had you on this program, Aubrey, which was during the campaign period.
Campaign period.
Yes. I put the question of the contract to you. I'm putting it back to you now. You have seen the arguments for and against the contract. Jagdeo said, the Vice President said, sanctity of contract. There's a matter that has been filed in the court, as I'm sure you're aware of that. You may have not spoken to the person because of your interest, or in national interest. Do you feel this all contract, the 2016 contract, which was a post-discovery situation applied to pre-discovery, do you think there's a case for renegotiation of that contract?
I think there's a case for Guyanese in keeping with the 1979 Act to do everything.
With 79, you mean 86? The
No,
Petroleum
man,
Act?
there was the Petroleum Act.
86.
No, man, there's one in seven. No.
I've studied it.
All right. There is
86.
one that says clearly the actions must be taken to ensure the people of Guyana benefit.
Yes.
I thought the original act was 79.
That was since almost 29. That's the
All
whole
right,
one.
but the point
65
I'm
before,
making
yes.
about that act sets out clearly that all
The
the
resources belong to the people.
people and they should be
Yes.
able to serve the people.
So-
What we have got to do is to take the action that is necessary to ensure that whichever company is here, including Exxon, the people of Guyana benefit. The method we will use to do it, we will have to arrive at. Renegotiation of contract is only one method. Because look, you could renegotiate a contract and still you won't improve the capacity of
That's
the
true.
people.
But at least you've had a chance. You've learned your lessons.
Yeah.
Now, that's not as clear an answer as I would have expected. But let me ask you,
Well, you know
the
that-
light is coming on now.
There are dangers in yes and no,
Yes.
but go ahead.
No, okay. Do you believe that it is right and proper that Parliament should be precluded for the next 50 years or so for bringing any legislation that is adverse to those oil companies? It's called the Stability Clause. Do you believe that should be removed?
I believe that it needs to be reviewed because of the context in which it was developed. When you're talking exploration, you're talking risks. Now, as far as I'm concerned, those risks no longer exist.
No, but not only that, Aubrey. The point I'm getting at is, and because I know you've done law, the point I'm getting at, Parliament has supreme powers to pass legislation.
I agree.
And this agreement says no, you can't do that.
Well,
It flies in the face of the Constitution.
and that is why people should challenge it in the court.
Will your party encourage persons to challenge it?
We will support anybody who believes that the rule of law in Guyana should be maintained and respected. And if it's a violation of the rule of law, we're compelled to support those who think we should live by law.
That's a very diplomatic answer.
But
And on that note, Aubrey, I'd like to say thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
We're just about running out of time. It's been a pleasure. And you know, this program will always be available. I say that.
And you
to all
know,
political
I'm
parties.
always available to speak.
And I want to thank you. And I want you to say to your secretary tomorrow, thanks for getting you here this evening. Operator viewers, thank you and good night, and I'll see you next week.